Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, Parler, and Instagram. And of course, be sure to visit www.mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, I command you to give me your name.
And cut. Nice job, everybody. Good job.
I'm gonna take that.
Follow monitors, let me lead.
All right, everybody, here we go. 3, 2.
Time to go off script.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Perkovich, and this is episode number 297. Out on October 8 exclusively on Shudder is The Cleansing Hour, a supernatural thriller that stars Ryan Guzman as Father Max, a social media star who hosts the popular live streaming show The Cleansing Hour, which streams live exorcisms. The catch? Well, Father Max is not actually a priest, and the exorcisms are staged, until one night a real demon tests Max's mettle in front of an online audience of thousands. Adding a fresh perspective to the worn-out demonic possession movie, The Cleansing Hour is an entertaining and thought-provoking horror movie that asks questions about faith and fame in this era of social media. Joining me now to talk about The Cleansing Hour is the film's director, Damien LEVECK. Damien, thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Matt. I'm glad to be here.
So this is a really interesting film, actually based on a short that you did back in 2016. I'm really curious, when it comes to already filming, putting something on film based on the story that you have, is it, when you reapproach that material, is it a continuation of the story that you have already, or do you analyze what you have on film, do you break it down, and then you kind of reconstruct it to make something new?
It was a little bit of both, actually. You know, the short film was always made as a proof of concept for the feature. So I always had a pretty good idea going into it what the feature was going to be. You know, whenever pen comes to paper, it's always a bit more challenging to, figure out exactly how you're going to fill out the rest of that story. But I'm pretty happy with where it ended up. So there are still very much elements of the original short proof of concept in there in terms of the concept, the characters, and the beginning and the ending of the movie. But, all of the stuff in the middle is new. So, if you have seen the short film, you can rest assured that there is something new and fresh in there for you to see. And it is a much bigger movie for sure.
The character of Father Max, played by Ryan Guzman, really interesting character. He's this social media rock star in the guise of a Catholic priest. And I'm curious, what was the inspiration for this character? Were you looking more towards kind of like the evangelical preachers that kind of like do a lot of their stuff online and what they used to do on cable? Was that kind of like more of the inspiration you were looking at? Because I don't really know much in the way of priests from the Catholic religion to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, the inspiration was really more just, from what I've gleaned from just being a person who interacts with others on the internet and just seeing the way that other people behave, especially just sort of the influencer culture of YouTube and Instagram and how that changes people's personalities. I think that Max sort of represents the worst of that in a lot of ways. But, I also think that there is some of Max in all of us. So, I think that Max was very much inspired by just my cursory sort of overall view of internet culture as a whole and the way that it sort of fuels narcissism. It wasn't necessarily focused on one individual person. And I have been asked if there were any particular influencers that I was, parodying, like a Zach Baggins or like in your case, a pastor or preacher of some sort, a televangelist. Not really, no. I just think that he's sort of an evergreen narcissistic douchebag, and I think we've all met that guy in one form or another.
It was really interesting how you said there's a bit of Max in all of us. And I think it's really true these days because of the whole social media concept. The one thing that seems to drive him more than anything else is that pursuit of the blue check mark, that that he's confirmed, that he's authorized, that he's situated in the world that he wants to make an impact in. And I think all of us kind of have that, especially these days. We can't help it. We're all creators in some way. We want to have some type of influence and some type of standing within kind of like this realm where you can put your work out there and you get some type of some type of clarification of where you stand in the world. And that blue check mark, I guess, goes a long way to getting there. I mean, when you write a character like him, do you kind of look at your own kind of foibles and you think, you know what, this would be a good kind of thing to add to this character? Because I think it was a really interesting thing and it really does humanize it a bit, because whether people admit it or not, it is something that kind of drives them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know several people who are very, very involved in social media as influencers and people who are just interacting with it on a regular basis. I wouldn't say necessarily that there's a lot of myself in Max in that respect. There are other qualities from my own personality that I wrote into Max. Just because like I'm not on social media, I'm not as active on social media as somebody like Max is. I really I tried to approach the character more from like, where do you derive your meaning in life? And I think that part of the problem with our society today is that so many people lack purpose and lack meaning. And I think that social media sort of fills that void for them in a way. And it's a negative choice. It's not a good way of filling your life. But, for Max, it served a purpose. And he's been able to assume this persona sort of as a defense mechanism to hide the person that he really is deep down inside, which you find out later in the movie. So, it's definitely a character flaw, but it's one that I think is relatable to a lot of people. And I hope that people can connect with that in a way. I really wanted this movie to have that subtext and have these deeper characters that are relatable, and while at the same time, being an entertaining movie that you can just watch and, have your popcorn entertainment.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I don't know about your approach to social media. I used to be all in on it until the whole COVID thing happened. And then when you're working from home and all you have is yourself in your home office and your computer, it's just kind of there. And I actually deleted my Twitter account like 2-3 months ago because I just like, I need to get away from this thing. And it's really interesting how there's two different themes in the movie. One of them is, of course, you have the demonic possession kind of strand of it. But on the opposite of possession, you have obsession as well, coming from the Max character. He's obsessed with his popularity. He's obsessed with his fame. And kind of like how the two kind of converge there is just really kind of interesting. The whole the demonic possession aspect of the film, though, was really interesting in that there's been so many movies of that kind of ilk, especially since Paranormal Activity broke like 10 years ago or so. And I know that you have to jump in on some of the kind of like the tropes of it all because you put in you're staging exorcisms within an exorcist film, and you got to deal with those tropes because that's what his audience expect. They need to see that stuff. Having said that, though, was there anything that you did not want to do as a filmmaker or as a storyteller that other films have done that approach the same subject? Was there anything that you did not want to touch that you said, you know what, maybe we can leave that on the side because I want to make my own movie, its own demonic possession film that can't be compared to other ones? Because to me, having watched a lot of these movies, it was kind of a breath of fresh air to actually watch how you approach the whole kind of subject matter and the whole subgenre.
Well, thanks so much for those kind words. That's a huge compliment because I really was something that I set out to do, to make a movie that was different from the other exorcism movies that are out there. My goal making The Cleansing Hour was first and foremost to make a movie that I would want to see.
Yeah.
And, being a big fan of horror generally and the exorcism genre specifically, I did feel like there were certain tropes that you really can't escape, but I do sort of address them in a tongue-in-cheek fashion. The priest who thinks that he can just, press the Bible against the possessed person's head and say a few words, and then, presto changeo, the demon's gone.
Yeah.
But there were certain things that I definitely did not want to do, and one of those things was, for example, the makeup. A lot of these exorcism movies go really over the top with really stylistic makeup, and really morphing somebody into a totally different human being. And like even The Exorcist itself, which is sort of like the gold standard for exorcism films, they go over the top big time with the makeup. I actually made a conscious choice not to do that. I wanted the makeup to be very subtle. So even though we did have prosthetic makeup on Alex Angeles while we were filming, it was meant to progress as the movie progressed, and it was meant to not completely take away from what she looks like. So that whenever the demon goes away and Lane comes out and is talking to us, we can still see Lane there and still evoke sympathy for this person who's turned into who is effectively the villain of the movie. So that was one of them. And then I also I'm subtly making fun of the whole idea that, all you need to do is say a few words and know the demon's name and you're going to be able to get rid of it. Okay, spoiler alert for everyone who's listening, cover your ears, put your earmuffs on. In the movie, they're trying to find out, like, what demon is this? Because if we can find out the demon, we can say the prayer that's going to get rid of the demon. Well, they think they find that out, and then they say a prayer, and they think all is well and good. And then, of course, it's not, and that's it. I think it speaks to their own naivete and the characters, and then also just me making fun of the idea that that's all that it takes. I think it's always been sort of a silly thing in exorcism movies, that all you have to do is say some specialized magic words and your demon is gone. It's just weird to me. So that's sort of a long-winded answer to your question, I think.
Good answer, Dave. Thank you very much for that. We've talked about the film. It is an entertaining film. It is the type of film you can sit down and watch and have, a box of popcorn and watch it. One thing that's really cool about it is the use of practical effects, and being a Shudder movie, Shudder Productions really do kind of front foot charge about using practical effects in their movie. It's important to them. Yourself, when dealing with the more practical effects kind of things, what's it like as a filmmaker being able to see effects in action on your set? Because I've actually spoken to other directors about this, and there was a director in Melbourne here in Australia. He talked about that with the use of practical effects, it actually is a really cool thing for the whole cast and crew to get into, because it's almost like a fun thing where you watch this thing come to life right before you, and it's kind of like the cast and crew get kind of entertained with it itself. Is that the case with this movie? As they watch the makeups, as they watch the effects and the blood and all the splatter, is everyone really getting into it and thinking, this is a cool day at the office today?
Well, I know that for the cast and the crew, they were having a blast with it. It was a lot of fun to watch. It was a lot of fun to participate in. For me, it was as exciting as it was terrifying. And I mean terrifying in the respect of, like, am I actually going to get the shot, or right. is this working? One of the things about working with practical effects is that they do take a lot of time to get right. It takes a lot of attention to detail and a lot of patience. So while I was really excited with the amazing practical effects we had designed in this movie, when you're working on a tight schedule and tight budget, it's nerve-wracking to do that, because you're concerned constantly whether or not it looks good, and you're pulling it off in the amount of time that you have. Yeah. So. But all of that said, I think we did it. And for every practical effect that we did, I'm ultimately very pleased with how it turned out. And my only regret is that we didn't do more. And I really wish that we could have done more. In fact, there were some effects that I wanted to do practically. We just didn't have the time/budget to pull it off. So we had to resort to CG.
Are you going to bookmark those kind of effect ideas that you have for maybe a future film?
In fact, yeah, one of my next projects is a contained creature body horror that has this big, life-size monster in it that's going to be a full-on, monster build. It's going to be a full suit and everything. It's going to be all practical, no CG. And I'm really, really excited about it because I'm so heavily inspired by, the great films from the 60s or from the 70s, 80s, and 90s with practical effects from, everything from The Thing to Gremlins.
I wanted to get back to the whole social media aspect of the movie because it's such a big thing. I mean, we could have, marketing wise, you could have easily just done hashtag evil for like as a marketing tagline for this film because it seems like that was something that really kind of resonated with me when watching it. And it's really interesting that when new technologies come about, how and with new technologies comes new ways to present art, whether it be film or music or whatever. There can be a reaction to that in regards to what is being put out there to the public. And it reminded me of, you mentioned Exorcist before. I think it was back in like 1974. Billy Graham actually said, the famous preacher actually said that within the reels of the Exorcist movie lied a real evil. And if you watch that film, you're exposed to the actual devil himself. And was that kind of thing, that kind of warnings from like preachers back in that day, was that something that you've heard of before? Was that something that influenced how you approached social media in your film as kind of like a conduit, a kind of like a channel of putting evil into the world? And is that something that you also view social media as? Like you and I spoke about, we don't want to get trapped into that void of social media because let's face it, there are things out there in that realm that can't be good for people psychologically and spiritually.
Yeah, I don't think that necessarily it's a conduit for evil in the literal sense. And, I don't think that what happens in the cleansing hour would literally happen to somebody. However, I think like anything else, when not used in moderation, can lead to destructive behaviors and psychosis. I think part of the problem with social media today is not so much that it's not so much the technology itself, but rather the way that we use it. And and granted, this is with acknowledging that the social media platforms have people writing them who are programming them to try and force you to pay attention to them. So I do understand that there is sort of a subconscious interaction with it where you can't help yourself but to use it. Now I totally get that, but I ultimately think that evil per se is really something that the individual user is responsible for, and I wouldn't really put all the onus on social media platforms. I think that there is a lot of truth, however, in social media. I mean, in the movie, in terms of the way the characters are interacting with it. If you notice that everybody who's watching the cleansing hour in the movie is, I would say almost everybody is neglecting a more important personal aspect of their life, whether it be the girls in the bar missing out on an opportunity to meet a guy, or the kid who is in his house and is being neglected by his mother, and the guys in Oman who are should be working on their bike, like all the personal quality of our lives is being sort of ripped apart. And then quite literally on set, you've got these three people who are being ripped apart both emotionally and physically by this monster that is being fueled by social media. So I think that this all really sort of ties into the larger message of the movie, which is sort of the buyer beware. Social media can be used for good, but used in excess is quite dangerous.
It's really interesting that the popular saying is that the greatest trick the devil ever told the world is that he doesn't exist. But in your movie, the demons in your film used the opportunity to let everyone know that they exist using this kind of social media feed. And that's just really interesting to me. So I think that there's a lot of thought there. And I think you can say that The Cleanser Now is definitely kind of like a thinking man's kind of horror movie.
I appreciate that. I really tried hard to get it there without being preachy. And I don't, it's meant to be a fun movie and I don't want to be preachy at all. So I'm glad that you sort of like, picked up on the subtext, and I do want people to know that, like this is, it's meant to be tongue in cheek. It's meant to be meta. This isn't, it's not a comedy, but it's okay to laugh at it a little bit because, and maybe by laughing at it, it makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So you laugh at it. And if you walk away from the movie with a stone in your shoe and start thinking about, hey, what was, there's a point in there, there's a message that I should be walking away with, then that's a good thing. And I feel like I've accomplished something.
So for everyone out there listening, The Cleansing Hour, October 8th by Shudder. It's a Shudder original. Damien LEVECK is the film's director and writer. And look, Damien, I thank you very much for your time today. Congratulations on the film. It's great we can talk about this movie because, like I said, I watched a lot of horror films come away, especially of the demonic possession kind. It's nice to see something that was fresh that made me think afterwards. And like you said, has that kind of satire in there as well. All worked exceptionally well. So congratulations to you, and best of luck with the release of the film.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate it, and feel free to reach out anytime. Love to talk to you again.